Chapter 3. Summary. Conflict between work and contemplation. Hearing the discourse on the ideal of the man of steady wisdom, Arjuna's confusion only increases. If that state of inwardness and serenity depicted in the above ideal is the end for man to seek, how could its pursuit be reconciled with the life of action to which Krishna has been simultaneously exhorting him, especially when that action is participation in a terrible holocaust like a fratricidal war? He therefore poses this question before Krishna, and the rest of the chapter is Krishna's answer to it. The two paths. Sri Krishna said, "Two ways of spiritual fulfillment have been revealed by me: the path of knowledge, the samkhya, and the path of devotion cum action, yoga. They appear different, but as will be shown later, the difference is only apparent and they can be reconciled. But it is the path of action that now forms the subject of discourse. By merely abstaining from actions, man does not gain that serenity of spirit, the unperturbed state of the sthita prajna. He will only be relapsing into idleness thereby. For one thing, it is impossible for any man to live for even a minute without any action, for man is physically a part of nature, and nature is ever active. He is therefore compelled to act. So sitting quiet and thinking that one has attained to that unperturbed state of the spirit will be rank hypocrisy. For such a person's mind will be very busy thinking of the objects to which he is attached. So the way of spiritual development for him lies not in abstinence from action, but only in action performed without attachments and under proper regulation of the senses. The law of yajna. God created man with the law of yajna as the means for his worldly prosperity and for his higher spiritual evolution. Yajna means self-sacrifice, the offering of what one considers precious for the service of God and one's fellow beings. If our fellow beings can be looked upon as the very tabernacle of the divine, for God indwells everything and everything is in that sense the body of God, this service itself becomes the highest form of worship too. Yajna at the lower levels is one of give and take. Man lives in a community which can thrive only by the exchange of commodities and services among its members. Each gets certain services from others and gives back certain other services in return. One who fails to do his part of the work, but insists on his getting his share of the good things of social life, is an exploiter and a thief. He violates the law of yajna and gets morally degraded. Rights and duties therefore go together, and to claim the former without due insistence on the latter begets corruption and decadence, and leads to ruin ultimately. The Vedic fire sacrifice, where thanksgiving offerings are made to the devas for the benefits that they have bestowed on man through nature, is symbolic of this great law of life. Both the ritual yajna and yajna in a social sense, consisting in the discharge of one's duties to the body politic, are based on action. And one who gives up action will be abandoning yajna too, and thus violating the basic commandment of the Creator, the ethical law of a life of non-exploitation. Enlightened ones too should work. There may, however, be some rare individuals who have risen above all personal wants. They may be able to withdraw themselves from society and live a life of self-contentment without depending on the services of others. Even they should work without attachment or desire for the fruits of work. For by so doing, one progresses spiritually and attains the Supreme Being. Just as socially oriented work makes man ethical, work done without any thought of selfish gain, as an act of pure service of God and man, raises him to spiritual heights. Purely unselfish action without any thought of returns or obligations is the higher aspect of the law of yajna. So Janaka and other great Rajarshis continued to be in the field of action and attained perfection through a life of disinterested action. There is also another reason why all, including men of higher spiritual attainment, should work, for otherwise they will be setting a bad example for unenlightened men, who, without a proper understanding of their mental state, would surely imitate their external behavior and relapse into abandonment of their duties, ending in pure idleness. A leader has always to be careful about the example he sets. Again, look at Ishvara himself. He has no wants, but he is ever engaged in works for the sake of the jivas in samsara. So an enlightened man, though he might have risen above all considerations of self-interest, should work unattached and without any return in view, but at the same time evincing just the same zeal and energy with which a man desirous of selfish returns works. Otherwise he will be creating conflict of ideas and ideals among common people. Wisdom is not to be confused with inactivity. The difference between the wise man and the ignorant man consists in this. The former is established in the experience that all actions that are supposed to be his are only the movements of Prakriti, and the real he, the self, is only the uninvolved witness. The ignorant man, on the other hand, being absolutely involved in and identified with the movements of Prakriti, feels that he is acting and enjoying. The way to attain detachment is not by keeping quiet without doing anything, but by discharging all one's duties, surrendering their fruits and the sense of agency to the Supreme Divine. Non-attached work, karma yoga, and discriminative understanding of one's basic nature as the unattached self, Jnana Yoga, are not contradictory, but complementary. For non-attachment in work is impossible unless one practices simultaneously the understanding that one is basically the unattached self, and except in the case of a few rare aspirants, the practice of such discriminative understanding about the self, without the support of unselfish work, will end only in pure idleness and failure to do one's duty. One who fails to do his duty and runs after ways of life that are alien to his inherent nature and aptitude only incurs sin. For to do what one ought to do is virtue, and avoiding it out of idleness, or cupidity, or base passions, is sin. What is sin? Arjuna thereupon asks the question why man commits sins, even though he may not want to, and Sri Krishna answers, it is desire, lust, and anger that appear as sin, and compel man to undesirable action. The seats of these passions are the senses, mind, and intellect. So to avoid sin, man must learn to control the senses first, but this cannot be achieved merely by suppression. One has to bring to bear the light of the self, the divine spark in one, on the intellect, mind, and senses. Thus should one conquer man's great enemy sin, the combination of lust and anger,